Hello, creatives. Welcome to our very first episode of the 1% Creative. I am super excited, to be honest, because I have like a lineup of guests. And on today's episode, we'll be demystifying some creative myths. And there's nobody else I thought to handle this particular topic. A very cool-headed guy who is good at his game, what he does. I'll leave him to introduce himself because that's the much I'm going to be doing on this show. I'll leave my guests to introduce themselves, right? The next voice you'll be hearing, drum rolls, is...
Hello. Thanks for
Hi,
having me.
Sid. How are you?
Good.
So, introduce yourself.
So I'm Sydney Thompson. I am an artist and primarily in filmmaking. I've done all sorts of things within marketing and film and animation and just different art competitions. And so I'm really excited to be here.
I'm super happy to have you here because I feel like this is going to set the tone for all the other episodes to come, right? And I want us to literally demystify some creative myths. You also are one person who does different creative things. It's not just one. What kind of creative would you describe yourself as?
Yeah, I would say in general, I'm pretty chaotic, where I like so many different things. And so my background, I grew up in the United States, in the state of Minnesota, in a city called Rochester, which is a very business-oriented place. That's where the Mayo Clinic is. So most people you meet are medical researchers or doctors, and not exactly the most creatively stimulating environment. So I think growing up, I found whatever I could get my hands on to kind of make things. Because I've always had kind of a disposition to want to create things. And so I've experimented with a lot of things. I've done theater, I've painted, illustration was a big thing, and drawing cartoons was another big part. And so it kind of just built up from there. And when I studied my undergrad, I had a hard time picking what I wanted to do. So on one hand, I did film production, a degree in film production, but then I did another one in animation. And then I did, in the US, we have, it's called a minor, which is like a kind of sub-category of what you're studying. And so I went into film studies as well, the more academic side. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm really excited to be out here and to bring that to the next level.
Great. So, I mean, like I said, I think it's one of a myth that you can't do a lot of things at the same time as a creative. I mean, what's your take on it? Because it's a place that most people are in currently. And the struggle is you could want to do painting, for instance, right? And you also want to do filmmaking. So how do you balance it? I know it's a possibility, that's one, but how do you balance it and not lose focus? Because I think I was also in that space where I literally could do a lot of things creative, but I didn't know how to channel and streamline, or probably just merge all of this together and, make out something productive with it. So I want you to talk about that particular, the myth of not being able to have to do a lot of things.
Yeah, I know there's that saying where it's jack of all trades and master of none, which is a saying that I don't like at all. I mean, I think like anything, there's a little bit of truth to it, but it really comes down to perspective. And I think for me, filmmaking has kind of been that primary mode that I focused and studied on. And so even though I am a painter and have some skill in it, I know I'm not quite at the level as what you might see hanging in the gallery. And that's because when you see somebody that's really dedicated to something like that, for the most part, really technical, like really good technicians are people who have dedicated all of their time to one thing. If you're kind of spreading out what you're doing among several different modes, then you're not going to have the amount of time that goes into, learning one particular mode of art. But for me, and I think in filmmaking, my focus is more on the directing side of things. And so when I think of myself as an artist, I think of myself more as a director. And so and if you think of different cartoons that have come out over the years, sometimes you'll look at them and be like, well, visually, this isn't necessarily the greatest, or something like that. But the person will bring their own voice into it. So I think no matter what mode I'm working in, I try to have the same voice in whatever it is I'm doing. So if I'm illustrating or animating, you know that it's me, even if it's not particularly, the highest quality in terms of technical ability. Yeah. So yeah, I think for most people, people kind of get that idea of, oh, I'm just this one thing. I can't do something else. Where I think there's a lot of benefit for people deciding to explore new avenues, and they can in turn really bring a lot of skills from other mediums into their main thing. It's all about learning, and I think creatively, a lot of ideas and a lot of your process comes from past experiences. So having as much experience as possible can only benefit you.
Something you said about perspective is very important, to be honest. Like, if you think, and I like the balance you give to it as well, you can be all of these things, but just have like proper timing, to, execute all the projects that you have and everything. So I want us to talk about some of the myths, yeah? And before we do that, what would you say have been the challenges, on your journey so far, and how have you been able to, overcome those challenges, not let it deter you? Because I know that, trust me, sometimes it can be very tiring as a creative. So let me know.
I think growing up, one of the things I've always kind of struggled with was it was different. I think I was kind of like the odd one out when it came to being in school, and the same when I started going through university. I think a lot of people that you meet, they have this idea of what it is that they're interested in, and then I'm kind of like all over the place, like, oh, I like this and I like that, and there's not really anything I'll say no to. And I think sometimes that can be a little bit hard, ironically, connecting with people. Especially because I'm always ready to go with whatever it is. And I think some people need more time to recharge in that, where I don't. I just like to keep going.
Yeah.
And I know that's been difficult, because when I'm in a film class or I'm coming up with an idea, it can be really difficult to describe to people some of what it is that I'm thinking. Just because I'm like, oh, we could do this and we could do that and we could do this. And there's all these different steps that come to it. And sometimes people kind of get caught up on one little thing, or like, oh, I don't know how that's going to work. And then sometimes what's also difficult is not even having the words to describe what it is you're thinking. So that's something I've had to work on. But yeah, there's always challenges when you do anything in the creative field. There's always an obstacle.
I think also what helps in this space is understanding what works for you. Mm-hmm. For me, when I get to that point where it's almost like I feel clogged, I can't do anything, I just go to the bed and sleep. Like literally, I sleep and I wake up recharged, and there's that freshness, that comes with it. So as a creative, I feel like we have freedom of expression. So why would you want to, bottle up yourself because you didn't get like a breakthrough on one project you're trying to finish, or, something, on the way. And one of the myths that I would like us to demystify today is the fact that creativity is a natural gift. Mm-hmm. Please, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so that one, it's difficult. And it doesn't help that there's a study that I think of, I think it was in 2012, but and it's something I remember in high school learning about, and it's always stuck with me. And I think now that I've gotten older and researched more into this, I realized, oh, that's really out of context. That's kind of a dangerous thing to look at. But essentially what the study did was it measured creativity in kindergarten age children, so about 5 to 6 years of age. Okay. And they found that somewhere of like 95% of them scored within the genius range of creativity. And they took these kids several years later and tested them again. And that number went from like 95% or whatever it was to much lower, like 20% or even maybe lower than that. Yeah. But it's still, what it was trying to say was creativity like is kind of innate in every. There's a couple different ways to go about it, because I think on one hand, it shows that everybody has creativity in them. And some people kind of use that study as a criticism against the school system, where it's a very rigid path, and sometimes it limits that level of creativity. But then people use it kind of on the other side, saying, well, not everybody's creative. And at a certain point, it's like some people are creative and others are not. And I think it's more of the case that everybody has it in them. And it is true that some people, I think, are more drawn to certain areas than others. Because you can think of like American Idol or something, where people will go up and sing and you're kind of like, oh, that person, they're not really that good. And then you'll have somebody else, and they'll say that they've sang for like, 20 years or something. And then someone who will just be like, oh, I just found out 5 months ago that I had a voice. And then they just have this amazing talent. Really? So some people are more drawn to certain things than others, but we don't always know that. I worked with somebody in undergrad who he cast an actor for a project, who said that his audition was just outstanding. And he's had, professional actors come in, and then this one person just blew everybody away. And so he talked to him and he asked what about his past experience. And this guy was maybe 60s, 70s. So he's an older person. And he's like, oh, I've never really acted before. But he had this amazing this gift that he didn't realize he had. And I believe he was a retired baseball player as well. And so, but it's everybody kind of has something within them. And you aren't always aware until certain points. I mean, I love reading stories about actors or people that discover a gift. I mean, I know one of the former presidents of the United States, George Bush, got into painting after his presidency. And some people would say he's a really controversial president. So they're saying maybe that's for the best that he got into that. But I think it's really misunderstood. And also, I think the term creativity is really nebulous as well, because we tend to think of it as being, there's kind of an acceptable way of showing creativity. But some people, if they have ideas that are a little bit too out there, that's kind of looked down upon as like, oh, that's just dumb. That's not creative, that's dumb. And so I think in general, we kind of have to expand our idea of what creativity even means.
And again, I also think that it's something that can be developed, right? Mm-hmm. If you have an interest in an area, I mean, like you said, it's something you're not limiting yourself. 3 years, 95% had that in them, and probably at 16 or 18, it drops to 25%. It means that most of the category of 25% probably worked at it. They developed it. They saw an interest and worked on it. I feel like that's something that people should just take it off. Yeah. Like, hey, you can have it as a gift, but at the same time, if you have an interest in it, go ahead and develop it.
And I know if you look at, I'm really fascinated by classical composers, and I know if you look at people like Mozart, for instance, something that kind of separated his upbringing. I mean, granted, he was a really unique person, but still, his environment growing up was that he was kind of pushed to express himself. He wasn't restricted, and we see a lot in families that have a really kind of. You talk to anybody really working in a creative industry and ask about their upbringing. Generally, they'll say, "Oh, I've had a lot of time to explore, and my parents, they kind of let me kind of do what I want and go down different avenues." Whereas I think you tend to find people in more rigid kind of structures. You find a little bit less of that. Not always, but yeah, your upbringing and kind of your mindset, the way you look at the world really influences that as well. The more open you are to kind of taking things in, and some of that's genetic. A lot of times, creative people, they have creative relatives. Even if they don't think of themselves as that way, it comes out in different ways. I mean, my aunt would never consider herself a creative, but what she gives us for Christmas presents every year is she will buy something from a store and kind of take a marker and paint it and make it really creepy, like Halloween-y. And it's so unique and funny, and it's just not something, it's a completely different form than what you would think, but it's really
crazy.
out of the box.
Yeah,
and you look at it, you go, I
crazy.
never thought of doing that.
Speaking of family, have your parents always been supportive of your journey so far? I mean, from when you probably discovered yourself and what you wanted to do, were there like hiccups when you said you wanted to follow this path?
Yeah, I think for me, I have a bit of a strange kind of path with that, because growing up, I always was kind of predispositioned to want to go down creative avenues, and I always loved drawing and doodling. But my sister was the same as well. And my parents have always been really supportive. And I know if I make something now, they're always invested and they want to hear about it. But I think as when I was really little, part of the thing is my brain is just so all over the place. And so, whereas my sister is much more focused. And so when it came to illustrating, for instance, that was always her thing. And so from a really young age, she'd always be drawing and drawing and drawing. Yeah. And so her skill really improved. And my parents really kind of picked up on that. But then you had me where it's like, okay, well, I'll draw, now. And then it's like, oh, now I had the camera out and I'm doing something. And then it's like, oh, now I want to, be an actor. And it was kind of strange because I don't think they were really used to that. And especially where I grew up, in my parents' financial situation, it wasn't like I could just go sign up for acting lessons or do, anything. And so I think my sister was a little bit easier for them to understand in that way. But I think once I hit my teen years and you get a little bit of maturity under you, and I was able to kind of explore each area a little bit more, that they kind of were like, okay, so Sid is actually a bit serious about this stuff. Yeah. Whereas, we always knew my sister was as well. And so, my parents are incredibly supportive. And my drawings and that, and my paintings, I'll give them to people for Christmas presents or birthday presents and as gifts. And, they hang them up. And so I'm like, okay, I must have done okay, made it off the refrigerator. It's on the wall, that's.
I love it. So, I mean, we're going to demystify another myth.
Okay.
That creativity does not pay the bill.
Okay.
I have something to say about that. Yeah. But you go first.
Okay. So this one, I kind of have two kind of conflicting thoughts on it. Okay. For one, I think that's wrong. but also the other part of it, I guess I'll say why I think of it as being wrong is, I know for myself, and that's something I've heard as well. When I was 11 years old, I told my grandma, I wanted to be an animator when I grew up. I wanted to work for Cartoon Network. And she goes, oh, you're not going to find anything. She's very blunt. And so, and that kind of was in my head. When I was going through high school, I was thinking I was going to become a teacher, when I finished. And I actually ended up, I was studying pre-med for a while, alongside animation. And then I was like, oh, I like this animation stuff way better. And then by extension, I got into the film. But I mean, when I graduated, it was a really big goal of mine to keep that creative momentum going, because especially a film degree is not something you can go on LinkedIn or look in the newspaper and be like, okay, well, there's just jobs like out the door, like they're just waiting for me. Like here's my resume. Let's get into it. You really have to work for it. And for me, my first job was I worked as a videographer. And full time, just a couple months out of university, and I was able to pay off my loans with that within 6 months. And so that's kind of the thing. And then also I've been looking into freelance work as well, and it's just about finding things. But the other part of it, though, I think that's just one way to look at it. The other, I think, comes down to what your goals are. I know for me, sure, I was making enough money to be able to support myself, but I wasn't rich. I wasn't, if I went to continued on becoming a doctor, my income would be greatly different. Or even if I studied something more conventional like accounting and that. But for me, the money isn't as important. Sure, I want to be able to support myself, but at the end of the day, what gets me going is being able to create something new. And my first job, it paid decently for a first job out of university. But I kind of ran into some barriers with how much I was able to bring myself into it. And there are kind of some more kind of internal things with that career that I wasn't a big fan of. So I ended up leaving and taking a different job that paid significantly less than that one. But I ended up loving that job so much better. And so that kind of comes down to it as well, is your goals and what it is you want to get out of it. And I think creatively as well, you know, I always outside of work want to keep time to myself to make what I want to make. You know, if it makes money, awesome, that's wonderful. But if it doesn't, you know, as long as I'm expressing myself and having things come out. So yeah, there kind of needs to be a balance. And some people, they are extremely creative, but they don't work in that field at all. They'll do something else. They'll be a farmer, they'll be a doctor, and when they're not at work, then they will explore something else. And for them, that works. It really just depends what your goals and what you want to do, and finding the balancing act between that to make you happy. Because some people will, you hear of Disney directors, animator directors, and they're extremely unhappy with what they're doing. You know, they're doing what they love, but also they're burnt out, they're miserable. Once they get home at the end of the day, they don't even want to think about touching a pencil. So it's all about your goals and what kind of drives you internally.
I love you. I love the perspective you give to it, because personally, I feel like if you're good at what you're doing, you definitely will pay bills with it. I don't think that. I mean, I'm a firm believer of the Word of God. It's in the Bible, the works of your hands. Like there's something about something that you're doing, it will definitely yield. Like you said, you've given a good balance to it. And I love the approach that you took in that regard, right? Another one we'll get to is that creatives are always inspired. Oh my God. This a moment of silence for... I think that's where we should do a moment of, because I'm not always inspired, yo. It's not true.
No, it's not possible. No, like that's where like imposter syndrome comes in. And because I think of, when you see something by Disney or hear about like Steven Spielberg or George Lucas and that, you just think of these people as being like, they're always going and like, they're never not doing something, and that they're always inspired. And then you kind of want to be at that level, and maybe for a couple of months you are kind of like, oh wow, I have just ideas flowing out of me. But then you run into like a couple of months maybe or a year where you're kind of like, it's just not coming to me. But no, yeah, it definitely, the thing is, there's something I heard too where people, and I meet this with a lot of people, where they will talk about what they want to do, or they have an idea, but they're just waiting for that inspiration to strike or that motivation to strike. It doesn't happen. And if it does happen, it's for a couple of days and then it's gone for months and months. So yeah, really a lot of people's creative output comes from routine, actually prioritizing it. And then the thing about inspiration as well, there's this concept that we looked at about the eureka myth, where it's kind of like you tend to think of people sitting around someday and they're in class or they're just walking around doing their groceries, and all of a sudden, I just came up with the next Star Wars movie or something like that, which, sometimes that happens. I've definitely had some moments where I'm like, I'm getting an idea from something, but most of the time, no. And even those ideas, what you'll find when you put them on papers, they're generally pretty bad. And so, it'll take a lot of time to revise them. And inspiration. And when you think of, this is something a professor told me about my first year of university, and he was saying, you think about any filmmaker, Stanley Kubrick or Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg, anybody, these people know film history. They've studied the craft. Quentin Tarantino, for instance, he never went to school to study filmmaking. He worked at a video store and just watched a ton of films. And when you do that, you get this whole arsenal of different ideas that when you're making something, you can pull on and be like, well, I remember they did this. Because that's what ideas are. They kind of, it's like a collage of different things you've seen in your life, and you put them together. And if you don't have that, what you tend to see, I know studying filmmaking, there's kind of a list of film cliches, and one of them is the amount of student films that start off with an alarm clock. Alarm clock goes up, somebody wakes up, I'm running late for class. Yeah. And or there'll be like one of them is a camera shot where people, if they open a refrigerator, the camera will be in there, and it's, somebody sees that refrigerator and they're like, this would be great. We all think the same ways. There's one time I wrote a script, and I was thinking like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever written. And then just by coincidence, maybe not, I found a video about student film cliches, and I had 3 of them, and I was thinking, how did that happen? And I was so distraught about this. I told somebody like, I had 3 cliches, and he goes, that means you're normal. And I'm like, okay, well that's just
accept it.
Yeah, but that's a blow to the ego when that happens.
That's really funny, but I can also relate. I mean, when you think you have like a fantastic stuff to put out there and you just realize that, hey, this is not good at all, you just keep it down. But I get it. There are a lot of myths. We can't go into all of it, but one that would have to talk about before this episode ends is the fact that creatives cannot handle criticism, and also that creatives are very messy and disorganized.
Creatives not being able to take criticism. That criticism is difficult, I think, for anybody. And I know for me, when I was 11 years old, if you said something about my drawing that I did, how dare you? It's like, I spent so much, you don't understand what it is. And that happens, especially going from my bachelor's to my master's. You tend to think at the end of your bachelor's that you've got everything figured out. Then when you go into a master's course and you do something that you've always done, and then you're told, there's a better way of doing this. You're like, how dare you? I know this. I have the degree. But yeah, there is it can be difficult to take feedback. But the thing to think about it is that these people they're trying to help you. And for one, when criticism is somebody's opinion, and it's really up to you to decide for yourself if that sometimes people give you a bit of feedback. It's because they've seen so much, and they've seen mistakes that you're making 100 times before. And so if you're really committed to what it is that you've done, you have to be ready to take that on. And generally what I find, if I'm in that boat, if somebody criticizes me for something intentional, I'll kind of know before I make that decision that, okay, people might say something about this, so I need to really make sure I justify it. But it's not true, because there's some people, sure, that are horrible with criticism. There was somebody that I worked with on a project who was someone that intimidated people because his vision was so clear in anything that he's done. And there was a project that I collaborated with him, and people are kind of telling me how methodical he was and how strategic, and it's like he just has everything in his head. I didn't find that with him at all. I found the first set of ideas he presented to me, I kind of thought, okay, this is good, but how can we build upon this more? And I had a lot of influence on that. And when it actually came to the production itself, he was director, and then I was his director of photography. There were a lot of things that he hadn't considered that I brought to it, and he was really receptive. And we didn't always agree. Sometimes, sometimes he had a better idea than I had, and sometimes it was the other way around. But generally, I think what made that project work was the collaboration piece of it. And part of that was, I think, both of us being well-informed in what it was that we were doing. And so the other thing you said about people being messy.
Creatives, not just people. They say creatives are messy and disorganized. I'm not.
Well, I can't speak on that because I am a little bit messy.
Sydney.
If you look at my desktop.
We're both in this together. Oh my God. But it's okay.
But only in some ways. I know when it comes to the filmmaking side, I have a producer mindset. And so my goal is to keep everything organized, because communication is such an important thing. And if people don't know what's happening and they don't know what channels to look, generally when people ask me a question, when is this happening or who's doing this? I will already have an answer, be like, look at this spreadsheet,
Yeah.
look at this folder. That doesn't extend to my personal life. My wardrobe is a little bit chaotic, but yeah, but I try to keep it tidy. But I try when it comes to my professional work and when other people are involved, I kind of have to take that initiative to make sure things are in tip-top shape, because if I'm messy and if I lose something, I'll frustrate myself. But if people are looking to me and they don't know what's going on, then I'm affecting others. So, but there are some people who are notoriously so meticulous with everything. If you go into, it doesn't matter if it's in their personal space or if, yeah.
I am like that.
But what I will say is when people say creatives cannot, are messy, they've never met a producer.
But I like the fact that your work life is organized. But your personal life,
yeah.
So you're literally sharing both similar, what's it called, attributes of messy and organized. So, I mean, I think that's a pass for you. It works for you, and that's it.
Yeah, some people, they'll describe themselves as being type A or type B. I'm like type A. It's like, okay, work life, maybe more type A.
Yeah.
Personal life, different story.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So what would you say are the tools that have helped you? Like, what are the tools that make your work easier?
I think physically what I use, it ranges quite a bit. I like to mix a lot of different things together. And so if I'm on a film production, I have, I own my own little videography studio. And so I have all sorts of lights, much like the ones, hanging around here and cameras and so I have an arsenal of different things. And sometimes it's the smallest little bits that matter. So I shoot a lot on my iPhone. And I have some lenses that you can clip on so you can get different effects. I don't know what I would do without the iPhone. It can just do so many things, but it can record audio, and I mean, it is just a wonderful thing. But I mean, in terms of the way I make edits and that, I use Adobe products. I don't like Adobe, but we make it work. It gets the job done. Yeah. But kind of more like mental, I guess, tools that I think of. One of them are I like to think of my priorities. And so when I go into a project, there's so many different details to consider with everything, thinking about what it is you want to say and how are you going to go about different things, what kind of people are you going to get involved. For me, I always think of, for one, it's got to be the story, has to motivate everything. So if I want to do something, I need to think to myself, what is it that I want to say, with this project? I could make something with really pretty pictures. There's so much of that out there. What separates my kind of collection of pretty pictures versus something anyone else has done. And so that's where I think having your priorities set, because it also gives you some liberty as well. Sometimes when you're shooting low budget, you don't have all the resources that a major Hollywood studio would have. And everybody wants to kind of emulate that effect. We don't have to. There's a lot of film movements out there that people have done a lot with very little. So I think that's a really big kind of driver. And I think the other thing, another tool that's really helpful is having a good circle of people kind of bounce ideas off of. I have a friend group where we will get together and we'll do different things. And it's just, ideas just come out of the strangest things. And I swear every time we get together, we're like, we should make a film about that. So I think that's a really big, having a good network it's really important.
I love it. That goes to say that you're open to collaborating with other creatives, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've collaborated. I've had some strange characters in my collaborative list, which they end up becoming some of my favorite people to work with.
Nice. So, I mean, what platforms can people reach you out on just in case they want to collaborate with you?
I would say I have a LinkedIn. That's a really big one. Otherwise, I have a YouTube channel that I post on, and I have an Instagram account as well. I'll give both of those.
All right. No issues. Thank you so much. So before you go, I'd like you to tell someone who's out there right now, practically struggling or stalling on their creative journey, like what do you have to say, given how much of experience you've had, given, all of the things you've had to also experience yourself? What would you say to them?
This piece of advice I have to give to myself a lot because it's much easier said than done. And I've worked with a lot of people through my undergrad, and I've seen people run into this trap, and we all do it to some extent. But when you're waiting for something, don't wait. The best time to start anything and to finish anything is right now. And I see way too many people saying, "Oh, I'll get started on this, once things slow down a little bit, once once my holiday comes up and that's done, or once I'm on the other side of this wedding, or once I finish school or this class." There's always some kind of excuse. But the thing is, when you work in that way, life is busy. There's always things coming up. And so if you're saying, well, I'll wait for the weekend to do this, or I'll wait for this, just do it when you have time. Because, and even just making small steps, even if it's sending an email or making a phone call out to somebody, just making the small steps and getting the momentum rolling is really important. It's kind of like in physics, there's like the laws of motion, and an object at rest will stay at rest. Yeah. You've probably heard that one before, but it's very true creatively. If you aren't making progress or moving, start. Just don't wait. Do what you can do now. If you don't like if you're a perfectionist, like I can get a bit in the perfectionist mode, and if things kind of you're like, it would be better if I wait, there'll be more ideas in the future. So just go ahead and do it.
Wow, it's been quite a time. I've enjoyed myself, Sid. I really have enjoyed myself. It's been enlightening, right? And it's you have a depth that, I love that people are hearing, and I'm hoping that a lot of people connect with you as well, and get more, as much as you also get from them. But this is the part where I put you on the hot seat.
See.
So it's like drum rolls. You're going to answer in 3 seconds.
Okay.
Your best movie of 2021.
Oh, best movie of 2021. Oh, I don't even know. What came out in 2021? That's a few years ago.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Best actor in a horror movie.
Best actor in a horror movie. Oh no. Well, I know. Okay, I'm biased. I'm related to Jamie Lee Curtis. Allegedly I am. So I'll say that.
Okay. Hot chocolate or coffee?
Hot coffee.
Okay. Before you leave as well, there's something we're going to be doing on the show. I have this here. I have something again for you. Mystery game.
Ooh, mystery. Oh, what could this be?
Yours? Would you like to open it?
I would love to open it. What lives inside?
You already guessed, right?
Oh, thank you, Sid. Oh, thank you so much. Oh, I love this.
Thank you.
It's got the stylus on the end too. This is premium.
I'm happy you like it. So what you do for me is, we're going to have to give this mystery note to somebody. I don't know who. Anybody can get this. But I would like them to hear a thought that you have. So flip to any of the pages, write whatever you want that person to hear when they receive this book. Is that okay?
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, it's got a little doodle in there.
I love it. I love it.
All right.
Date and your
Yes. Yep.
Great.
It's all in there.
That's yours. So you're going to have to give me this back. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sid. Like I said, had an amazing time. And I know that people who have listened or who would eventually listen would also feel the same way that I felt. Okay, creatives, that is it for this episode. For many of us who have listened, don't forget, I would have to recap what our guest said. He said, know your craft. It's very important to know your craft. Don't be limited by this myth. They are not true. Just do not wait. Also, do what you need to do now. The best time is now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and also hit the notification button to always know when new episodes come up, okay? Don't forget, this is the 1% Creative, a platform for creatives by creatives. My name is Nnenna Alozie, and I am a creative.